Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're heading to a remote hilltop in southeastern Turkey to look at something that completely, absolutely shatters the established timeline of human history. We're going to explore a place so ancient, so incredibly complex, and honestly, so deeply mysterious that it forces us to rethink the entire dawn of our own species.
Everything you learned about the first civilization is wrong. Just let that sink in for a second. Get ready to unlearn your old textbooks because the story of human progress, it's not that neat, linear progression we were all taught in school. We used to think humanity slowly evolved from simple hunter-gatherers to farmers and then to city builders. But what lies beneath the dust of this single Turkish hilltop violently disrupts that whole timeline.
And the story of its discovery is practically a masterclass in missed opportunities. Back in 1963, an archaeological survey passed right over this exact landscape. They noted the artificial shape of the hill, saw some scattered flint tools, and just dismissed it as a mere Byzantine-era graveyard. They walked right past the greatest archaeological discovery of our time. It wasn't until 1994 that German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt reviewed those old field notes, realized the landscape simply didn't add up, and saw its true nature. The moment he saw the top of a megalithic pillar poking out of the dirt, he knew his life and human history had changed forever.
To truly grasp the anomaly that shocked Schmidt, we need to look at the timeline. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BC. That's roughly 12,000 years ago. This site was constructed millennia before the invention of the wheel, before writing, before pottery, and even before the dawn of agriculture itself. It predates Stonehenge by a staggering 7,000 years, and the Great Pyramid of Giza by over 7,000 years. According to conventional history, the people alive back then were supposed to be primitive nomads, entirely incapable of complex, large-scale engineering. Yet, here it is.
And a scale of what these supposedly primitive people built is absolutely staggering. After 30 years of painstaking excavation across a sprawling 22-acre site, which, by the way, is roughly the size of 17 American football fields, archaeologists have only uncovered an astonishing 5% of it. Ground-penetrating radar shows that there are at least 16 to 20 more massive circular stone enclosures still buried deep beneath the earth, silently waiting to be discovered.
To really wrap your head around the immense physical reality of this place, you've got to consider the sheer weight of what was built. The pillars currently standing in the excavated enclosures weigh between 10 to 20 tons each, but some of the completely unexcavated, unfinished pillars still waiting in nearby limestone quarries, they weigh an impossible 50 tons. To put that into perspective, you are looking at the weight of a fully loaded commercial airplane carved straight out of solid bedrock.
These towering 18-foot T-shaped pillars were quarried, transported, and perfectly aligned into vast circular formations by hunter-gatherers, people who supposedly lacked any complex organizational infrastructure whatsoever. They had no beasts of burden, no metal tools, yet they somehow achieved absolute architectural precision, cutting these megaliths from the earth and standing them upright in this highly coordinated, incredibly demanding, multi-generational effort. It's just mind-blowing.
And they didn't just stand stones up in the dirt either. They turned them into masterpieces. The stonework features intricate, high-relief carvings of foxes, scorpions, and vultures. Predominantly, though, they carved snakes. By studying animal behavior in relation to human culture, a field known as ethnology, researchers suggest the snake acted as a powerful, death-related symbol for these ancient people. This wasn't merely decorative art, guys. This was a deeply symbolic, heavily encoded message carefully chiseled into stone. So, the obvious haunting question becomes, exactly who built this? Who were the people capable of coordinating such a monumental undertaking 12,000 years ago? How did disparate bands of roaming hunters somehow unite, organize, feed themselves, and execute an engineering project of this massive magnitude without the bedrock of agriculture to sustain them?
While the evidence points to a highly sophisticated society that completely defies our current historical categorization, research suggests they actually mapped the stars, with pillars aligned to specific star clusters or asterisms. They were also potentially tracking the Taurid meteor stream. This was a violent stream of debris which some scientists heavily link to the catastrophic Younger Dryas event, a sudden, devastating plunge in global temperatures that triggered an ice age. Furthermore, as we look closer at the human remains found scattered in the surrounding rubble, we start to see evidence of a chilling ritual involving the human dead.
Recent anthropological analysis of human skulls found in the fill at the site reveals something fascinating and undeniably dark.
Scientists have found deep carvings and drill holes meticulously made into human crania using sharpened flint tools. This strongly suggests the skulls were purposely modified so they could be suspended by cords from these very T-shaped pillars. It points to a profound and complex skull cult, a deeply ritualistic way of honoring, displaying, or maybe utilizing the dead right within the shadows of these monumental spaces.
But you know, the deepest mystery of Göbekli Tepe isn't how it was built, or even who built it. The most baffling realization, the great plot twist here, is what happened next. Around 8000 BC, Göbekli Tepe was not simply abandoned to the elements to naturally decay over time. Instead, it was intentionally entombed. The entire sprawling complex was purposely and laboriously wiped from the face of the earth by its own caretakers.
The burial process itself honestly defies logic. Methodically, carefully, the builders gathered thousands of cubic meters of material, tons upon tons of limestone chips, animal bones, and flint tools. They packed the circular enclosures with this fill, systematically burying the magnificent pillars they had spent generations carving. They completely sealed and hid the entire 22-acre site beneath an artificial, man-made hill, deliberately locking it away in the absolute dark for 10,000 years.
Archaeologists are still fiercely debating why a society would expend the colossal amount of energy required to bury a 22-acre megalithic site. I mean, was it a ritual retirement, a ceremonial way of decommissioning a profoundly sacred space once it had fully served its purpose? Was it a desperate, frantic act of protection against a coming catastrophe, an invasion, or a radically changing climate? Or was the act of burial itself the ultimate planned sacrifice of the temple, like the final dramatic act in a grand multi-generational ceremony? While some modern researchers suggest natural slope slip might account for some of the fill over millennia, the overwhelming architectural consensus points to an intentional, massive cover-up of unprecedented scale.
And this intentional burial leads us to a fascinating intersection where modern archaeology meets ancient lore. When we examine the timeline of these ancient events, there is an eerie, almost unsettling correlation. See, Göbekli Tepe was constructed around 9600 BC. In his classical dialogues, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote that the highly advanced civilization of Atlantis was destroyed by cataclysmic flooding approximately 9,000 years before his own time, which puts the destruction roughly right at 9360 BC. Plato's date for a lost advanced civilization falls squarely into the exact era that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were actively tracking the stars and carving towering megaliths.
Which brings us to the most universal of human myths, the Great Flood. Göbekli Tepe sits in Upper Mesopotamia, which is the very region where the oldest written records, the Sumerian tablets, describe a catastrophic flood wiping out an advanced prior age. Geologically, we actually know that as the last ice age ended, massive glacial melting caused dramatic and devastating sea level rises. In fact, geological evidence confirms catastrophic flooding occurred nearby when the Mediterranean violently breached the Bosphorus Strait, catastrophically flooding the Black Sea basin to the north. So it makes you wonder, are the master builders of Göbekli Tepe, the survivors of these ancient cataclysms, desperately preserving their knowledge in stone before the waters rose?
This leaves us with Klaus Schmidt's profound final realization before he passed away. He concluded that Göbekli Tepe is a remnant of civilization, not the beginning. Think about that for a second. It implies that these magnificent pillars weren't the first rough draft of human ingenuity, but the haunting echo of something truly great that had already been lost to the ages. They buried it, preserving it perfectly in the earth, perhaps as a message for the future. And remember, 95% of this sprawling site remains unexcavated, entirely untouched. So I leave you with this final lingering thought. If this is just the 5% we've found so far, what else is still waiting in the dark?